Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Redbeard, and this is part 3 of the Revamp series for the Shadows of Change. Come February, it will be time to bring the changes out of the shadows and into the light. What an ironic name, the Shadows of Change, considering all of the controversy that happened in that DLC's wake. So I'll throw the image up now of what I laid out in the first video of Kislev, in which what we need to justify $25 DLCs going forward. Today I will be going over, I'm going to start with units for a particular reason, and then I'm going to, later I'm going to talk about any generic lords, heroes, and then beyond this DLC, what I think we still need for Tzeentch, DLC or FLC, sometime down the line in the future. So, without further ado, I want to jump right into an awesome idea I had for the aspiring champions of Tzeentch. Now, this is my definitive take on what the aspiring champion of Tzeentch should be. I did this whole video back then about where I scoured the internet researching, Age of Sigmar and 40k, because with the Demons of Chaos you can do that, okay? Like Games Workshop and Creative Assembly do that as well. Believe it or not. Demons of Chaos are a crossbreed, okay? So, deal with it. Okay, but anyways, so the definitive take I have, I posited that, maybe we could look at Tzaangor Enlightened, or Magisters, or the Gaunt Summoners for inspiration for aspiring champions of Tzeentch. Well, today, I looked at Age of Reckoning. And in the Age of Reckoning, there is a character named, I'm probably butchering this, Tchar'zanek, or something along those lines. But his model is utterly perfect for an aspiring champion of Tzeentch, because that's basically what he is anyways. And while I'm on him, he could possibly make a good legendary character for Tzeentch, potentially a legendary lord. But I digress. His model in particular would be perfect for the aspiring champions of Tzeentch, and I will settle for nothing less. This is the definitive model right here. And it literally, the model itself can tie into what very little current lore we have. So in the game, in the Warriors of Chaos update, we got the Severed Claw as the first aspiring Monogod aspiring champion, and it's a cool design, but it's got skulls on it, and it's very which is kind of corny, literally. And they need a little more, because we need forget just an ROR, we need a regular unit of aspiring champions of Tzeentch. And I think the Severed Claw will get a bit of a reskin when we get this regular unit that I am calling the Claws of Change. So just like in Nurgle, we get the Blight Kings, we get Khorne Wrathmongers. I'll revisit Slaanesh in a future video, but Painbringers are twin souls. Would be maybe an option, but the Claws of Change are the perfect aspiring champion for Tzeentch. The height of the Severed Claw gives credence to these long and bowed avian legs. Additionally, this Age of Reckoning model, Tchar'zanek, it's just perfect. When you become a Claw of Change, you grow a claw as a third arm that is said to be directly controlled by Tzeentch himself. Anyone the claw pierces changes into a chaos spawn. In Total War, maybe this gives them the Tides of Transformation ability from the Mutalith Vortex Beast, lowering melee stats and speed. When the claw is severed, Tzeentch's essence flows from the wound, mutating his followers into greater warriors. In Total War, this gift could literally be the Mutalith's other ability, Gift of Mutation, granting a boost to melee attack to nearby allies. So this is what the Severed Claw, our Regiment of Renown, would have instead. Fan-made lore connecting the ROR's name to an Age of Reckoning design to create a unit on the tier of Blight Kings or Wrathmongers? Hell yes. A unique aspiring champion for each Monogod is a must for me at this point, and I am damn proud of myself for putting together the Claws of Change as the definitive answer for Tzeentch. Now, some other things. So the staff in the right hand, perhaps they have some kind of like Warp Flame shooting attack, or maybe bound spells like the Blue Fires of Tzeentch, so they would act almost similar to how the Sisters of Twilight give Hawk Riders the Arrow of Kurnos, but for an aspiring champion unit. So again, they would probably have no more than 2 uses, but it would be very powerful to get 12 blasts of blue fire from each of these entities. It's 12, right? The aspiring kit? Or maybe it's 16. Yeah. So, beyond that, he also holds a giant sword in his left hand as a one-hander. Now, you know, a regular-sized man would probably not be able to even wield that with 2 hands. But this guy, the aspiring champion of Tzeentch, the Claw of Change, can wield it in one hand as deftly as a rapier. So, they would still be mighty powerful in melee, even though, you know, they have that staff in one hand. And, yeah, and then that claw would just maybe give them those bound abilities I talked about. And even, like, it even has a similar aesthetic to Village, almost, where, like, one side is kind of almost unarmored in the top right of the model, and then on the left side, it's more heavily armored. You know, the warrior versus the magic. And then these avian legs, additionally, may give them a boost to speed. So maybe these guys can move at like 50 speed or something to make them a little extra intimidating. But yeah, the Claws of Change. If you think this is as perfect an idea as I do, please post Tchar'zanek. So that's spelled, if I can remember correctly, Tchar'zanek, like apostrophe Zanek. Okay, post his picture on, you know, Reddits, any forums, big YouTube content creators, their, you know, comment in their comment section, like, this is the perfect idea for the aspiring champion of Tzeentch, and I will settle for no less. So spread the word, the word is good. But let's move on, so I'm not spending all day on this, but I will round back to Tchar'zanek at the end. So I want to quickly go through some other units. Most of these I've covered in the past, so I just will give the basic spiel. I'll try to link something up in the top right now, where maybe I go into detail a little bit more about it. So, starting with the Firewyrm. So basically this is the greater chaos spawn of Tzeentch. There's one for each monogod, being the Blood Beast of Khorne, the Greater Beast of Nurgle, and the Greater Fiend of Slaanesh. But the Firewyrm, piggybacking off this utterly genius fan-made lore of the Claws of Change, Firewyrms are often depicted with one arm as a claw. Perhaps this too is a special mutation controlled directly by Tzeentch himself. This fits well with the greater chaos spawn of Tzeentch too, with the mutations. As the lesser kind of chaos spawn, the greater ones for every monogod should be hard-hitting, unbreakable sponges. In tabletop, it had a Warp Flame breath weapon. In Total War, I would like it if it simply acted like an ancient salamander of Tzeentch. A mobile artillery monster ported from the Lizardmen and given warp flame ammunition. Bada bing, bada boom. Moving on to Tzaangors. Yeah, we can't talk about mutations without talking about how we should be mutating those Tzaangor models to have some beaks. Please and thank you. They need more variants, first and foremost, being the Skyfires. These units would shape the definition of not only the Tzeentch, but also the Beastman roster. Similar to Doom Knights, they would be mounted on discs. While somewhat decent in melee, they preferred to shoot their magical, armor-piercing, warp flame arrows down on foes from the skies. They would become an auto-include in most mid to late game Tzeentch armies, and Beastman armies at that as well. Some other Tzaangors. Cousin to the Skyfires are the Enlightened, a 24-entity unit riding discs. They would be a melee variant. This might make them somewhat redundant to Doom Knights, who are generally better in melee. Since they are Tzaangors, though, they would have Woodsman, Vanguard deployment, immune to Psych, and would be faster and have the Arcane Charge ability. So that makes them different. The most interesting ability they could have, though, is two bound uses of Blue Fires of Tzeentch, similar to what I talked about with the Claws of Change. Just like the Sisters of Twilight, even more so because they're flying. Giving the Hawk Riders a bound Arrow of Cornus, same concept. Lastly, there are great weapons and dual weapon variants for the current grounded Tzaangor unit we have. Their models come from AOS, but would work plenty fine in Total War. Okay, next. Great Winged Terrors are not something I've covered in the past, I don't believe. So, I want to quickly go over that for sure. So, their lore reads as follows. Great Winged Terrors are strange magical ships that float above the waves and are used by Tzeentch worshipping warriors of chaos and chaos fleets. They sometimes spend hours hanging motionless, only to then accelerate to incredible speeds and fly across the waves to engage the enemy. Sounds like a UFO. Great Winged Terrors are difficult opponents to face, for not only is their movement unpredictable, but they can heal themselves with magical energy. Should they be defeated, they explode in a flare of light, leaving no trace of their existence, and even captured vessels simply vanish, leaving their captors to fall into the sea. And for weapons and equipment, their magical energy plays across their hull and wings, arcing out as bolts of Tzeentch. So, gathering from all that, they would have regeneration. They would probably have missile block chance because they have this erratic, unpredictable movement. They would have a death, explosion, and animation where they completely vanish when they die, and damage nearby enemies with this explosion. They would shoot bolts of magical energy, so maybe this could be kind of similar to the Luminarch of Hysh from the Empire, kind of like this very slow rate of fire but very powerful beam artillery, but this one flies, which makes it even scarier. And maybe it's very slow moving but has a bound ability, that you can use every minute or 2 minutes, where you increase its speed like threefold. It goes from maybe 30 speed or 40 speed to 90 or 100 speed for 30 seconds, and then you have to wait till the cooldown comes back. Finally, but maybe it could be a mount, but only for the Herald of Tzeentch. I don't think I'd want to see it as a mount option for anyone else. Just the Herald, the Lord, Lesser Demon of Tzeentch. Moving on to the Chimera, which I've, again, talked about in the past, but it's almost somewhat redundant to the Cockatrice and the Manticore, but it would be more powerful than both of them. No Petrifying Gaze or Rampage or anything like that, but boosts Winds of Magic a whole bunch, especially if it's like a mount for a spellcaster. And it would have more uses of breath attacks than, say, a Cockatrice or any typical thing, because it has 3 heads, and each head might have its own breath attacks. Which, looking at you, Chaos Dragons, get your own... Get separate breath attacks, please. But yeah, I'll leave a link in the top right where I talk a little bit more about Chimera. Bang bang, check that out. And for the kind of last, truly unique and new unit, Kairic Acolytes could be like a slave tier 0 unit, meaning it's a cheap tar pit unit with terrible stats that is just there to tie up enemy units mostly, and doesn't require any additional buildings to recruit. They're just any settlement you have. Cultists like these could work well for all the Monogods in Undivided, as well as, again, just slave tier 0 units. Cheap. Two melee variants, and maybe even an archer or cavalry unit for them would also be interesting. Minotaurs, giants, and dragons, I think, should all get a marked unit for each Monogod. All of them, for Tzeentch, would get barriers and magical attacks. The dragon would have warp flame, breath attacks. Yeah, and kind of piggybacking that off that a little bit, I do, maybe with a Beastman update, would like to see all heroes and lords be able to dedicate similar to the Warriors of Chaos and get a kind of unique, not only model, but kind of skill tree based around who they pick. Or maybe it's just like just one kind of skill line for each of them, where they can dedicate to one of the 4 gods in just their regular skill line, and maybe then it just gives a little bit of aesthetic change to reflect that. Obviously, Khorne wouldn't get any sorcerers, though. Brimstone horrors would be like Nurglings for Tzeentch, like a swarm unit. They would probably have 2 ammo and may spawn from dying blue horrors, which leads me into my final topic for units, which is just tweaking existing units. So I would very much like it if pink horrors spawn temporary blue horrors instead of crumbling. So when they would usually start to crumble, they just spawn blue horrors and insta crumble. Then those blue horrors, will be crumbling but still alive. And then they'll revert to pink horrors after battle if they survive, something along those lines. I would just like that mechanic to exist, because that's part of the whole shtick of the horrors. That's one of their main things. Screamers. Screamers are like the snow leopard of Kislev in my Kislev video. How I think they just fundamentally, mechanically, gameplay-wise, do not work and need to be rebuilt. Need a serious comb-over eye and a big think on how they should work. I think the big thing here is Screamers should kind of get more influence from their lore and tabletop rules. They should have a Sky Warp passive ability, flying enemies. So this wouldn't work on ground enemies, because they're basically meant to hunt things in the sky. Like dragons or something, eagles. They have this Skywarp passive ability, slowing flying enemies, and lowering their melee defense as well. Additionally, they could have a slashing bite like tabletop, which maybe deals a bleed-like effect of damage if 2 Screamers units are attacking the same target. So this would basically this would build tactics around them that make them worth bringing. You get one unit of Screamers is still probably going to be terrible, but 2 units of Screamers are now going to be much more effective because they're together. Then just beyond that, I think you should increase Screamer stats, because their stats are fucking terrible. Holy shit. Oh my god. Okay, so yeah, increase the melee attack and charge bonus by 50%. So melee attack would go from 26 to a 39. Charge bonus would go from a 22 to a 33. And then melee defense, I think you'd increase it by like 25%. So like 28 rounded up from 22. And then talking about the DLC units, now I think pretty much every single one of the Tzeentch units was flawed a bit in its design. Don't get me wrong, the Mutalith Vortex Beast is very cool, but in lore, it mutates enemies into Chaos Spawn by just being around it. I sincerely thought they were going to have some kind of ability to summon Chaos Spawn, even if just like very temporarily. I think you need to. I need them to have an ability, which maybe every 50 kills they get, they summon a temporary Chaos Spawn like on top of them for a minute, or maybe you can place where the Chaos Spawn with a bound ability or something. But it could just be a passive where they just spawn every time you get 50 kills. Then the Mutalith Vortex Beast would truly feel like the Mutalith Vortex Beast. It's very cool still in its implementation so far. That feels like such an essential part of it to me. Reworking the Cockatrice. So in 8th edition, it had acidic vomit attacks. So yeah, give it 3 basically breath attacks, vomit attacks. Give it its rule from tabletop. And make it a mount option for Tzeentch warrior characters as an alternative to manticores, which I'll go over more when I talk about the characters. But and then obviously give Tzaangor's beaks, and maybe even give Chaos Steeds of Tzeentch beaks while you're at it. But I digress. And then I think the Changeling and the Blue Scribes, I haven't played a lot of them, but as far as I can tell, they work great. No changes necessary. On the other hand, now, kind of like the Mutalith, Aekold works great in its current implementation, but I think there's an essential part or two of it that for me, need to be in there and are not. An AoE healing passive. So, not just healing himself, like regeneration on himself like he has now, but maybe it's a reusable bound ability where he can pop it, almost like the Patriarch's healing ability, where you get 3 uses per battle, and it's an AoE heal. That he leaves like a healing trail, a trail of life behind him wherever he goes. So, yeah. And then can toggle flying such as Malagor can. So with his Windblade and lore, he can use that sword to fly. So it would he would have flying animations, I guess, similar to Malagor. Obviously, he doesn't have wings, but yeah, I think especially the flying part is kind of essential to his character, to me. Segueing into the home stretch, we are now going to talk about characters, starting with generic lords and heroes. So the most obvious additions we need here are the Chaos Lord of Tzeentch and the Exalted Hero of Tzeentch. Just a melee variant instead of the kind of pure spellcaster. They would still be Tzeentch characters, so they have barrier, they have magical attacks. They just wouldn't be spellcasters. They would be more highly armored and better in melee, better melee type mounts. They might have some sort of passive or bound abilities, or maybe even a bound spell that kind of represent that they are a Tzeentch flavored lord still, or hero, but not spellcasters, melee focused. So Chaos Lords of Tzeentch, melee lord, perhaps similar style to the aspiring champions we've been talking about, the Claws of Change, based on Tchar'zanek. Yeah, this model, perhaps, or maybe it looks a little more like Aekold or something, like a chosen. That would be fine too, especially with mounts in mind. So mounts, Chaos Steeds, and Discs of Tzeentch at least. Instead of a Manticore, maybe they could have a Cockatrice mount or a Chimera mount. Additionally, Chariot of Tzeentch, or maybe a Chaos Dragon of Tzeentch, because Chaos Dragons are more Tzeentch aligned than any other gods generally. So the Exalted Hero of Tzeentch, a melee hero, similar maybe in style to the Doom Knights aesthetic. For mounts, Chaos Steed, Chariot of Tzeentch, Disc of Tzeentch, Cockatrice. Bound spells or spell-like abilities, like I talked about before, but maybe if we did have that, maybe the spellcasting wouldn't be damage focused like spellcasters. It'd be maybe the more underused spells like Glean Magic and Treason of Tzeentch. Moving on to the Tzaangor Shaman. Now again, I would like it if all the Beastmen, Lords, and Heroes got flavors for all the monogods, but the Tzaangor Shaman in particular stands out as, if we weren't going to get all of that, we could still get the Tzaangor Shaman, which I'm a big Beastman fan, so I still hope we get all that, but I digress. Tzaangor Shaman may have the full lore of Tzeentch, and then a choice between two lores. So again, whether you choose, so it's beasts and wild. So whether you choose beasts or wild, they're still going to have the full lore of Tzeentch. They just will additionally have either beasts or wild, is my take on it. They would and whether they choose beasts, they would summon cockatrices instead of manticores, or if you choose wild, they would summon either Tzaangors or maybe incarnate elementals, or Mutalith Vortex Beast as kind of like a late level skill maybe. They would buff Tzaangors, obviously, Cockatrices, Mutalith Vortex Beasts, Furies, Chaos Spawns, Firewyrms, Chimeras, anything in the wheelhouse of the bestial side of Tzeentch. Not the warrior side, not the demon side, the bestial side. For mounts, Chariot of Tzeentch, Disc of Tzeentch, obviously. Burning Chariot, maybe. Cockatrice, maybe. Maybe it just has Chariot and Disc, though. That would probably make the most sense to me, since you're giving those other mounts to other guys already. And then finally, potentially as an alternative, I guess, a Pyrocaster. So basically an Exalted Flamer, but as a hero variant. Would buff Horrors, Flamers, Burning Chariots, Soul Grinders, Firewyrms, anything that shoots Warp Flame, really. Chaos Dragons of Tzeentch, if we get those. And maybe they could replenish ammunition as a bound ability, would be probably the biggest, useful thing to have them have to bring them into the roster, you know what I'm saying? For legendary characters, we got enough legendary lords and heroes for Tzeentch in this DLC, I think. I think we're good on that front. But for the future, I think the next DLC has to be Egrim von Horstmann. I mean, he is in my opinion, the coolest Tzeentch character. Most popular, Galrauch would be another great addition. I feel like he's more of a legendary hero, a very powerful one in the sense of like Ariel or Lord Croak, but he's a Chaos Dragon of Tzeentch. And then you might be done with Tzeentch at that point, though. At the same time, and by the way, I talk about those guys more in another video, which I'll link at the top right. But at the same time, Tchar'zanek or Tchar'zanek, this new character I've discovered from Age of Reckoning is a big part of that game apparently. If you have beaten that game and know more about his story, please tell me in the comments. Tell me about him more. But I will just read his lore on the Old World Lexiconum while we're here. Tchar'zanek was a powerful Chaos champion of Tzeentch who led an entire army of Chaos against the Empire in a cataclysmic event unseen outside of the Ever-Chosens themselves. Tchar'zanek began his rise to power in the same fashion of many other Chaos Chosen, having been chosen by the Great Manipulator to lead the tribes of the North in his name. Tchar'zanek set about conquering and defeating all the tribes he could. Eventually, his war host became large enough to contend with his rival, a similarly powerful war host that owed allegiance to Nurgle, Tzeentch's enemy. The two armies met in the Chaos Wastes, and the conflict was such that a great mountain was made from the corpses of the fallen atop this mountain. Tchar'zanek fought the exalted champion of Nurgle in a great battle. Tchar'zanek defeated his petulant foe and casted him down the bloody slopes. In that instance of victory, he became suffused with the Raven God's power, and thus became his ultimate champion. As a chosen champion of Tzeentch, he is much more subtle of a warlord than many of the Chaos champions who have come before him. Strategically, he relies upon psychological warfare and targeted attacks on civilian populations to demoralize the enemy, disrupt their supply chains, and disguise his true intent. To accomplish his goals in Oslan, the Raven God's champion will turn to the methods he knows best: corrupt the strong, destroy the weak, and sow the fields of battle with terror, until no resistance remains. In the woods and dales of Oslan, the enemy infiltrates and raids, striking at random, sacking farms and villages without warning, and leaving just enough alive to spread the panic they carry. In the cities and towns, Tzeentch's subtle minions twist the minds of men, rising up cults and converting secret sympathizers to their unholy cause. Tchar'zanek is easily recognized on the field of battle. His extensive chaos mutations have set him apart from his comrades. His head is crowned with an asymmetrical pair of horns, and a third arm ending in a vicious claw has sprouted from his right side. His legs have grown extra joints, standing him head and shoulders above other champions. As part of his command strategy, Tchar'zanek has created an elite force within his army, which acts independently of the main body of the army, bent on a secret mission of which the actual invasion is a mere cover or gambit for. In Oslan, this Raven host is dispatched behind enemy lines to find 4 forgotten relics of power that holds the key to Tchar'zanek's master plan. In the Troll Country, the Raven host are also called upon to block the investigations of the Order of the Griffin into the origins of the plague, and to seek out an ancient artifact of great power that can be found there in the possession of a particularly ill-tempered chaos troll. To what purpose Tchar'zanek seeks to put these artifacts to use, and what they might have to do with the mysterious chaos plague that saps the strength of the Empire, no mortal man knows. For Tchar'zanek is a champion of Tzeentch, and the mind of the changer of ways sees all paths of the future. Now, right there's a little tidbit. The Raven host that is described in here, maybe could be another name for the Claws of Change that I posited before. Either name, I think, is fine, as long as they... Again, I think that model is perfect for an like a unique aspiring champion of Tzeentch, at the level of Blight Kings or Wrathmongers. Now that is finally it for today and for this series. And I will be putting to bed any Cathay videos or Kislev or I've just done a whole bunch of videos around like the Shadows of Change and Thrones of Decay, and I am ready to move on. So I'll probably do some sort of video when the Shadows of Change update in February happens, but beyond that, I'm pretty done with these races. I'm ready to move on to like Slaanesh Khorne, Norska, and Ind, like stuff like that. Any other ideas you guys want to see? Feel free to jump in the comments. Oh, and in the comments, tell me your top 3 for each of these races as well. And let me know if I missed anything as well. But yeah, thanks for being here. Hope you like the series and stay tuned. More on the horizon. Peace out. Have a good day.